If we get, there's a couple of you here that already come, but if we get like 5 or 6 guys, it literally takes 15 minutes or less. So if you, this Sunday, could come out, or in the next couple weeks on a Sunday, and help do that, we would greatly appreciate it. Sunday at noon. And we provide you with a full steak and lobster. No, we don't. Any other announcements? Ed?
I need a couple of guys to help dig out some material out of the back storeroom right behind the church, right after breakfast, if you're available. It's a couple of pieces of material we need for making a sign down at the thrift store. And so anybody that can stay for 15 minutes be appreciated.
Thank you. Any others? Well, today we're going to finish up the last of our series of the Good Samaritan, week 5. And Dave Hernovich is the one that originally put all this together. He's done a great job. It's been a great series, I think, at looking at different aspects on this. So this last one, he gave to me because, you'll see in a few minutes, because I had connection to it. But he also gave me like a full, I think, 40 minutes worth of videos. So he said, so Jim, really don't talk too much. Just play the videos. Next time you see him, he said that, Jim, don't talk too much. The videos speak for themselves. Well, we're going to do that, but I am going to talk a little bit. So here's the thought I want to give you as we start this. So this whole idea of sacrificially helping someone else, that we have this idea of the Good Samaritan going out of his way to help someone that's not like him, that's different than him, and that we take that name now today as a good thing, even though a Jew hearing this in the first century would not have necessarily looked at that as a good name when they heard the name Samaritan. But the ultimate goal of Jesus' parable, the ultimate end game of where he was leading with this story, and where he's leading with his whole ministry is how do we take not just one example of this, but how do we live this out as a community of faith? How do we make the world a better place? Because ultimately, that's what we're called to do as Christians. And I'll bring it down to as Christian men. Our goal is to lift up the world and serve the world in God's love. And that's kind of our final theme today as we go into this last part of this series on the Good Samaritan. So we're going to start with the video of the guy that we've been watching each week, and I invite you to watch this. I don't think we have sound.
At the beginning of the week, I shared with you that little thought experiment for determining whether or not religion makes the world a better place.
Can we turn it up and then maybe start it over again, since he starts right at the very beginning?
Young muscular men walking your way, would you feel more or less safe knowing that they had just come from a religious gathering? Well, one day a very non-religious man decided to take a crack at that question. He said, tell you what, I'm just going to stick with the letter B, and I'll tell you that I've been to cities like Belfast, Bethlehem, and Baghdad, and I can tell you that in each case I would have immediately felt more threatened if I knew those men had just come from a religious gathering. If you're not a geography or a history expert, those cities are sort of synonymous with some of the world's major religions. They're also synonymous with a lot of the violence and bloodshed that has come from those religions. And one thing we've seen this week is that if our religion is based on our obedience to God's commands, well, then I'm not sure you're going to go out and beat some poor person up, but I'm also not sure how quick you'll be to go out of your way to help some poor person out. And so hopefully the religion that is revving in our hearts and running our lives is not a religion that focuses on what we need to do, but on what has already been done. It's not a religion that is first and foremost about our love for someone else, but about the love that we have from someone else. Jesus, our perfect neighbor. In fact, the night before he died, Jesus said this to his disciples: "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." Again, because of sin, it is now impossible for us to love God above all things, and as a result, to love our neighbor as ourselves. But thankfully, a new kind of love has flooded into our world in the person and in the life of Jesus Christ. It is a love that is directed at our neighbor, not because he bears the image of God, but in spite of the fact that he has lost it. Love your neighbor as yourself has now become love one another as I have loved you. And the cool thing about that love that we have from our Savior Jesus is that not only will it make an impact in our world, not only will it make a difference, it will cause people to stop and notice. That kind of love is so unique and so foreign that people will want to know where it came from. In fact, Jesus went on to say, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." Friends, as we show the kind of love that Christ has shown us, it will make people stop and pay attention. It might even cause people to stop and ask, where does this come from? Why are you like that? And the good news is, you'll know exactly where it came from, and you'll be able to tell them.
I love that video today, especially, and David would have never thought about this when he was putting it together, but, you know, a group of us were just in Belfast 2 weeks ago. And the peace accord that stopped the violence in Northern Ireland took place in 2003. And so we're 22 years into that peace. And yet, in Belfast, you can go anywhere in the city and you can be on one block and there is a sign, there's memorials everywhere, and there's still this tension that's there. And so you can go on one block and read the sign and be there in this memorial that's a Protestant and basically telling you those damn Catholics, everything that's happened is because of them. And they've still never gotten full retribution. And you can walk 2 blocks and find a Catholic memorial and saying the same thing towards the Protestants. Today in America, there are Christians that are rising up that say, our faith says that we need to condemn people, separate people, attack people. That's on the rise, and it's not here, it's everywhere in the world. And what he powerfully is saying here is the way of Jesus is the opposite of all that. The true follower of Christ exhibits love. And I'm convinced that I don't have it within me to share love. It's only Christ in me, working through me, that helps me get to that place. And ultimately, that's the goal. We have to have Christ, and that's not church. Because like I said, there's churches today that are proclaiming a different message. That is a personal relationship. In the midst of a horrible thing, God can do amazing things. So last summer, during my renewal leave, Dave Hernovich came up. Literally, I think it was the day before I left or 2 days before I left. He said, hey, there's this little place. He said, you're going to be in all the D-Day stuff. I spent a whole week on all, I think I went to every single one of the the beaches of D-Day, both U.S., Canada, and England. And I went to almost all the museums. But David said there's a little place, a chapel that nobody goes to that you need to go to. And he wrote the name down, gave it to me. And he actually later told me, he said, I would have never gone there except somebody told me there's this little chapel you need to go to. And he said, and I went there once. And there's an amazing story that took place there. And I want to share that story today. And I'm going to share it first with the video that I posted when I was there last summer. So if you'd play that, Dawn. Greetings, everyone. Today I'm starting my first day of touring the Normandy invasion sites. And it's already been a powerful morning as I've spent the morning at Utah Beach. I'm so blessed that I was directed to this little tiny church, this chapel in the city of Angleville-au-Plan, I'm sure I've said that wrong, where during the first 3 days of the American occupation, this chapel was used and by two medics, Robert Wright and Kenneth Moore, to treat over 80 soldiers. What's powerful is that they treated soldiers that were both American as well as German. In fact, the chapel changed hands while they were here, and the medics stayed and continued to work. And when the Germans saw what they were doing and that they were treating German soldiers, they left them alone. And in fact, a German officer asked if he could bring more, and they did not refuse anyone. What a powerful message from this little tiny medieval chapel to remember the power of peace in the midst of war, and the model of the Good Samaritan. And so I'm just blessed to be here. As I close, that they want to have a beautiful two stained glass windows that are devoted to those 3 days and the work of those two medics who have both been honored here. It's a powerful place, and I'm just privileged to be here and to hear this story. Here's one with their name, honoring them. John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, that they would lay down their life for their friend. So God bless. Have a great day. I was going to stay in that chapel for like 10, 15 minutes. I ended up sitting there for about an hour and a half, journaling, praying, just tearing up. I mean, it was just so powerful. And which I didn't show in the video. To be honest, when I got on my renewal leave, I was going to send a whole lot more stuff. And then actually, it was just so good to be away from you all that I just kind of didn't. But in love. But what you're going to see in a few minutes, but all the blood stains are still there. The bullet holes are still there. And they have just a little book. Most of the stuff there's in French, but they had a little book that told the story, and it was in French and English. It was actually in, I think, three or four languages. And I sat there and kind of read through that book and the events, and it just overwhelmed me. Because that's the love I want to give, unconditional love to everyone. So here's the whole story of what happened.
It's the early hours of June the 6th, 1944, D-Day. A medic falls hard into a muddy field just outside of a small village in Normandy. He can hear cracks of gunfire and quickly gets out of his parachute. Ken Moore rushes towards the village. Church with a big red cross on it and rushes in. Inside is Robert Wright, another medic. The two men greet each other and quickly get to work. It would be the start of an episode that would go down in history.
I'm Kenneth Moore. Right, Robert Wright.
The silence of the church is broken as the door bursts open and injured soldiers start to arrive. Without supply crates, they just have their medic bags and pocket first aid kits. Outside, the war intensifies. The Germans have pushed into the village and the fight has become a brutal house-to-house brawl. Inside the church, Ken can hear the cries of the injured. He just can't sit by and do nothing. Protected by just his red cross on his helmet and his armband, he ventures out into the...
Back in France, Kenneth Moore sees an injured man in the distance.
Thinking quickly, he grabs the church's old wooden wheelbarrow before running across the open road. Several houses away, a German soldier spots Ken's figure. Lining up his rifle, he takes aim. He has him in his sights, finger on the trigger, ready to fire. But he sees the red cross and relaxes his finger on the trigger.
Medic! Medic!
Ken makes it to the other side unscathed and finds soldiers from the 101st Airborne giving provisionary aid to the wounded man.
Together they pull the man to the wheelbarrow and Ken runs back to the church.
He crosses the open road, ducking and running through the storm of lead and into safety. Territory is won and lost across the hours, and the two medics keep bravely venturing out for more, risking their lives to save more injured American soldiers. With evening approaching, Ken rushes through the door, carrying a wounded man. But this time, the church falls into a shocked silence. Everyone stares at Ken and is patient, for he isn't American. It's a German. Ken brings the German to a pew and administers aid, completely ignoring the intense gaze of the other men. Robert silently approaches and without hesitation helps to tend to the German. One by one, the stares turn away, nobody daring to object. When asked why he helped the Germans, Ken later said, "They were young men, just like us. They were just wearing different uniforms." After that, more Germans were brought in for treatment. Inside the church, the work continues until the door slams open. Standing there, silhouetted by the evening light, is a German soldier. His gun is drawn, ready to fire. Nobody moves. The German soldier locks eyes with the medics and notices the small group of Germans in the corner. Slowly, he lowers his gun, performs the sign of the cross, and leaves. Robert exhales with relief. Now seeing the danger, he grabs the rifles and imposes a strict no-weapons rule, forcing everyone, regardless of side or rank, to leave their guns at the doorway. With the day turning to dawn, it's becoming clear that the 101st needs to retreat. Their superior officer arrives at the church, warning Robert and Ken that they will be forced to pull back, but they can't take the wounded.
But you, come with us if you want to live.
Ken and Robert take one look at each other and declare they'll both stay. The Germans take back the village and start to bring their wounded to the church, asking for help. The church was becoming full, to the point that the floor had to be used. Those that were not expected to last the night were given spots closest to the altar. The night passes and there's a thump at the door. A German officer and his men are at the church entrance. The men proceed to enter, but Robert tells him there is a no-gun policy, and even the Germans are not exempt. The officer smiles and nods to his men. They are hesitant, but follow his instructions. Once inside, the officer thanks the medics for their help and asks if there's anything they need. Robert replies,
Supplies and a doctor.
I can get it to you in 24 hours.
The pair shake hands, and the officer leaves. By midday, the fight is back underway. The Screaming Eagles are pushing back with renewed energy, regaining the lost ground. Throughout it all, the medics brave the open, but this time, something different happens.
Halt!
for whenever and wherever the two men appeared, the battle would stop so they could pass. The Americans regain the town house by house, and with the German retreat, mortars begin to drop. There's a crash of gloves and a thump as a mortar rolls along the church floor. By some incredible miracle, it was faulty. Had it exploded, the whole church would have been reduced to rubble. Robert quickly picks it up and throws it back out from where it came. Suddenly, a barrage of bullets pierces through the church's windows, raining glass over several wounded. Robert peeks out the door and spots a Sherman tank firing away with its Hull machine gun. He immediately runs out, seeking to stop the tank, but when he does, he finds one of the 101st has got there before him. An American lieutenant arrives to inform the medics that they needed access to the church steeple to use as an observation post. Ken point blank refuses, stating, "You can't do that."
Can't do that.
The lieutenant confidently used his rank to get the medics to back down. But Robert stood firm. This church was a safe haven for the injured, and it would not be weaponized.
It will not be weaponized.
Over the course of 3 days and 2 nights, they tended to over 80 people, of which all but 2 would live to see another day. The church still stands today. There's a monument to the actions of the 2 medics and multiple stained glass windows in honor of them and the liberating forces. The most poignant reminder is the pews that still bear the stains of that fateful day. There's also an unassuming cracked tile that marks the spot where the mortar round miraculously failed to detonate. Wright wished to be buried in the grounds of the church after his death, but bureaucracy made it impossible. But even after death, his will was not to be denied. Somehow, some of his ashes were brought into France and buried in the churchyard, where a simple plaque marked R.E.W. for his initials marks the place where the brave medic finally returned.
So what's our verse? A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And then back to our parable. And who is my neighbor? Everyone's our neighbor. I'm going to end with this one. This is actually an interview. It's a trailer for a great movie about this whole thing. So play the last one.
Bob and I started rounding up casualties, and we used a farm cart to transport the wounded that couldn't walk.
Church was the best thing I could think of, and it was the safest.
I would guess we had 40 or 50 American wounded. The church was packed with casualties. They were young men much like us, except they were wearing a different uniform. They were all grateful for the help that they were getting and relieved that they were still alive.
The Germans were treated the same as the Americans. The Americans were treated the same as the Germans were, and we treated them all the same.
I tell my grandchildren, my role in the war, I was there sort of as an observer. I wasn't a rifleman killing people.
I wasn't there killing people. I'm going to put up the question in just a minute, but as I was have watched through all these a couple times in the last few days, and just being reminded. The thing that's continued to help me, the theme today is kind of how do we make the world a better place? How do we live in a way that changes our world? And you know what? I think we probably have 55, 60 guys here today. And history tells us that even 2 people can change a place, let alone 40, 50, 60 people can make a radical difference. But I've become convinced that nothing that I do, I would do naturally in and of myself. It's only Jesus working in me. And that all changed the night in my fraternity study room that I gave my heart to Jesus. That I said, it's not about church, it's not about anything else. I grew up in church, I went to church my whole life, but it was about a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That I sat in my room one night and I prayed and said, I'm lost without you. I need you to lead my life. Not to be my co-pilot, to be my leader. And I surrendered myself to Jesus. And that's been over 42 years ago now, 43 years ago. And you know, I'm messed up because it's still a work in progress. But every day I wake up and try to commit that new day again to Jesus. Today, it's not my will, but your will. Put me to where you will, with whom you will, to what you will, lifted up or laid down, that I can serve you today and continue to walk with you as the leader of my life. And, you know, I just encourage you. I'm not going to give an altar call today. But if you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, it's what it's all about. It's not about church. It's about a relationship. And I encourage you to do it. If you need help with it, come talk to me. I'd love to help you with that. Here's the last slide. A new commandment I give you: love one another as I have loved you. You must love one another. And how did Jesus love us? Well, first and foremost, he left heaven to walk on earth. I mean, that's a sacrifice right there. But then he lived a perfect life. He died a horrific death and was raised on the 3rd day. This time that we're in right now, that we're celebrating, that we're getting ready to go through next week, both the horrific death and the glorious rise. That's pretty far that he went to love us. And that's the example that he gives. And that's the love we need in our lives that we can only get from him. So here's the question at your table. From blood-stained pews to a cracked tile on the floor, how might we at Lake Deaton UMC continuously cross the road to show